The price of cable TV may soon come down as the Nigerian Senate on Wednesday adopted a motion directing all paid television service providers to adopt pay-per-view model as against the mandatory monthly subscription. Senator representing Benue South Senatorial District Abomoro, who sponsored the bill, lamented the incessant hike in prices of various bouquets by the service providers, which have been raised again without considering the economic hardship subscribers are passing through. The Federal Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy, as well as the Nigerian Communications Commission, were asked to investigate the frequent price hike.
Scientifically balanced full picture of the situation as provided for in the international precautionary principles.
The pay-per-view that Nigerian subscribers are demanding for to avoid paying for services which they may not consume.
The service, the quality of service they are providing to Nigerians. If service is poor,
to establish an ad hoc committee to further investigate this incessant increase in fare or fees by DST.
Experts are urging Africa to take conscious steps towards building better policies and establishing resilient economies in the journey to recovery. These formed parts of outcome at the virtual 2022 Africa Public Sector Roundtable. Bossy Abel reports.
COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented disruptions globally, reducing earnings and increasing poverty and food insecurity. While the global economic effects of the pandemic have started to recede, 2022 seemed to be a difficult year for the African continent. The reason policymakers are adopting strategies for a resilient post-COVID-19 in the public sector. This online roundtable for the Africa region, tagged a more responsive public sector, creating value for sustainable development, is another platform for harnessing public finance management strategies.
Local capacities and capabilities must be strongly developed. That would assure availability of local resource base that will drive reform process in public finance management sphere.
This is a crucial thing, a fundamental belief which spurs greater performance and drives getting the best value possible out of the public purse.
Today about the future of the public sector in Africa, the accountant's role in shaping that future.
Financial reforms, capacity building, resilience and sustainability in the public finance management system are some of the solutions profiled in preparing for a post-COVID-19 era.
This is why we come to the need for supportive strategies, policies, laws and procedures. We need well-functioning organizations, educated and skilled people.
These improvements, experts say, must be technologically driven in the public sector to improve performance and reduce pressure on fiscal policies. Boss said Able, Business Express.
Oil and gas stakeholders are concerned that a period of high energy prices driven by war and tight market fundamentals is looming as global diesel shortage increases the risk of oil price spike. This is as the price of diesel and other distillate products, including kerosene and jet fuel, is already skyrocketing. Experts say it is hard to predict which way the situation and markets will go. Lydia Sampson has details.
Energy crisis occasioned by the Ukrainian and Russian war is taking its toll globally, and Nigeria is not exempted. The Russia-Ukraine war, seemingly far away, is having far-reaching impact on not just global economy, but a critical sector, the global oil market. Ironically, the high prices are being passed on to consumers at the pump in their diesel and electricity bills. Experts say high energy prices contribute to increased costs of virtually all goods and services, further fueling the energy challenges.
Geopolitical tensions in Ukraine and Russia, prices of crude oil went up exponentially. When the crude oil prices rise to that level, it also affects the derivatives of crude oil. So prices of diesel also went up.
Global stocks of diesel and other middle distillates have fallen to the lowest, and experts predict similar shortages of these transport and industrial fuels may propel oil prices to a record high.
The price of diesel is going up, of course, because the price of crude is going up. Yeah, but we have to find ways to, and if we manage the economy in such a way that we had invested back into the economies through these commodities instead of selling them, we would have a situation where the average Nigerian would be able to afford these increasing prices.
In Nigeria, petrol is transported using petrol tankers. With the demand for diesel so high, transportation of petroleum and other heavy-duty freight transportation has continued to have adverse reactions on the value chain.
If the product can be produced in Nigeria, there's nothing like so-called landing cost that bring up the price of petroleum product. Even the economy of our country is going to be improved.
The expectation is not just for local consumption, it's to export refined petroleum product.
The invasion of Ukraine and subsequent boycott of Russian fuel threatens to make diesel shortages worse, though countries around the world are battling fuel shortages. As the war continues to increase pressure in the system, some analysts say the risks of disruption to supply have not yet been fully priced, adding that the world may be poised for further scarcity and supply disruption. In Abuja, Lydia Sampson, NTA News.
Thank you, Lydia. There with some energy sector issues, and it is going to dovetail into our focus this morning. Now, there is no doubt that Nigeria has huge infrastructure gap. While government is striving towards bridging this wide gap, the country still faces activities of bandits and terrorists as well as vandals, which are destroying the available infrastructure, from railways to ports, pipelines, and electricity. Experts have said a well-developed infrastructure has the potential to increase productivity and the much-needed economic growth. One of such experts is Professor Uchewaleke, who is with me in the studio right now to speak on the need to protect infrastructure as well as raise funds to finance this same infrastructure. Professor Uchewaleke is a professor of capital market at Nasarawa State University, Kefi, and President Association of Capital Market Academics of Nigeria. A man of many caps, I may say. You're welcome, Prof.
Thank you very much, Leah. My pleasure.
Great. So I think let's just hit the ground running. The report just before now is talking about the issues we're being faced in Nigeria, from petrol to kerosene to diesel to jet fuel. I mean, the whole products coming from that commodity we export, and then we still import them after some value addition. Can we really put a price tag on the money we're losing? As some of them have pointed out, we're importing, we're paying bills. How will you quantify local refining, the infrastructure now, the cost?
Of course, the cost is huge, and this has been made worse by the fact that it does appear we don't even have the data. Okay, nobody, not even the agency that should know, is able to tell us that this is the quantity of fuel, that is consumed in Nigeria. And that makes the whole issue of even the subsidy opaque, which is why some of us feel that this subsidy, should go. And the cheering news is that the Dangote refinery is on, and by the grace of God, will be coming, be functional, pretty soon. But again, of course, you heard recently that there were attacks
on that refinery.
Yeah. Yes. So, and I was talking about infrastructure. For me, that's economic sabotage. We cannot afford in this country, to destroy the little infrastructure, that we have. Nigeria is among the countries rated lowest in terms of infrastructure stock to GDP. For us, it's just about 35%, and that's below sub-Saharan Africa. Countries like South Africa, for example, has as high as 80-something%. And if you look at I think the most recent global competitiveness report, which also ranked Nigeria 130 out of 141 countries in terms of quality of infrastructure. And some estimates have it that for us to get a handle on infrastructure, or to bridge this infrastructure gap, we need to spend as much as $35 billion on an annual basis, up to 2046. Where are we going to get that kind of money? So even if you put the entire budget, that of 2022, if you recall, is just 17 trillion. If you put the entire thing to infrastructure, the whole, will still be there. And that is why the private sector, has to come in. And that's why I'm happy that the government's National Development Plan, places emphasis on the private sector bridging the infrastructure gap. The private sector contributing as much as 85%. But the private sector isn't going to do that if we have this insensate destruction of infrastructure.
Yes.
Why should a sensible person, for example, go to attack rail infrastructure? Okay. Let me even give you this famous quote by John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy once said that America has good infrastructure, not because America is rich, but America is rich because America has, infrastructure. As a matter of fact, he was emphasizing, good roads. So when you have good roads, when you have rail, you have ports. Okay, these are the infrastructure that drive development. So you can't talk about increasing the employment rate. Okay, you can also talk about reducing inflation rates when these are not in place. Transport infrastructure, for example, is linked to trade. Okay, trade contributes about 15% to GDP. And if you look at the GDP report, the recent one that talked about GDP improving, trade contributed significantly. Trade and transport, they are linked. Transport infrastructure is also linked to inflation. Part of why inflation rate is high in Nigeria today, especially food inflation, is because of transport challenges. So if the government is trying to fix these challenges, incrementally, gradually, and then you find these little ones that will have been destroyed, of course, it doesn't send the right signals. So an investor, for example, coming into Nigeria to invest in rail, okay, would pull back, okay, knowing full well that infrastructure is not protected.
Okay, while we're talking about protecting that infrastructure, I want to take you on two things before we leave that rail sector. And the first is Minister Amechi puts the cost of the destruction on the Kaduna-Abuja rail track at about 3 billion naira. And people are asking, why that much? Does it have to do with just the infrastructure now, or does it have to do with the revenue that is being generated and the period of that of the time that the train wouldn't be moving? Can you help us to explain this?
Okay, if I understood what the minister said, minister didn't say that would be that was the cost of the destruction. I think minister was saying that the 3 billion was the request the ministry had made in connection with having in place some surveillance systems along our rail lines, not only Abuja, Kaduna, but also Lagos, Ibadan. That request was made, but because it was delayed and it didn't come, that's partly the result that we had, and that to even put that in place now would cost much more.
Yes, because there's been a lot of back and forth on what he actually said and what it meant.
Yes, I think that was the point he was making. But I also think when you talk about as a matter of fact, I just finished doing a presentation on a public-private partnership, and it's in connection with what I'm about to say now. When you have public-private partnership, because that's the only way the country can drive infrastructure, the government can do it alone. The private sector, must come in. So the case of Abuja, Kaduna, for example, there are expectations from the government, even in the case of public-private partnership, because we have what is called allocation of risks. Part of the risk that the government, will bear in a PPP arrangement is the protection